Welcome back. And we're going to continue to inform and educate myself and my listeners. And now we're talking property. President Cyril Ramaphosa has announced the commencement of the Property Practitioners Act from the 1st of February 2022, with the Act expected to bring significant changes to the property sector. The Act is a consumer focused piece of legislation that has been designed to protect consumers in the property industry. And some of the significant changes include defining who is a property practitioner, Fidelity fund certificates, property defects, the new board of authority. So, to help us understand what this act is and the changes in the act. And for me, the plus for all of us, I think it's the operative word is it's a computer consumer. I'm saying computer. My apology. Consumer focused piece of legislation. So yes, to benefit and protect consumers. So joining me is Winston Kunene, and he's from Libertalia Group. He's group executive and founder of Libertalia Group, and he's going to explain to us what this all means for us, the ordinary property buyer, or somebody in the market for property. Good afternoon and welcome, Winston, to our
Hi,
media.
Miriam. Hi, Miriam. How you doing?
Well, thanks.
I'm very well, thank
So
you.
tell
Thank you for
me,
hosting.
in 2 weeks' time, we're going to have a new legislation regarding property. And as I mentioned, it says this was brought on to be more consumer focused and to protect the consumer. So, please, can you explain to us what are the new changes that are going to become promulgated into law?
Okay, so like you mentioned earlier when reading the text, this law has been this law has always been there, but it mainly focused on the old traditional term which we call the estate agents. And over the years, we realized that there have been so many problems, issues that have occurred, so many legal, situations, which is what this whole law is constituting of. So basically, it's very important, especially for consumers. Hence, it protects the consumers for them to protect themselves when making any property transactions. You deal with a lot of scammers. You deal with a lot of proclaimed professional property practitioners. You deal with a lot of unregistered property practitioners, unregistered attorneys. And I think this is such a great act that we've compiled. So the PPA, which is Property Practitioner Act. So the most important things that we're going to focus on is defining what a property practitioner is. We're going to focus on a Fidelity fund certificate, which is very, very crucial, especially for property professionals to showcase when conducting any property transactions. We're going to focus on the new board, which has replaced the old board. The old board used to be named EAAB, the Estate Agency Affairs Board, which now will be replaced by a new board called Board of Authority. So yeah.
Okay, let's start. So, Mariam Mia, presenter of Salam Media, would like to do a side hustle, and I say,
Yeah.
you know what? What's into selling a house? It's just very easy. I know home. I have a home. I can go around, show somebody. Can I just then say, you know what? I can start advertising. I'm selling homes, and then go canvas to sell homes. Can I do
Yeah.
that without some sort of certification?
And unfortunately not. Hence, there's this new law now. I like the side hustle there. But unfortunately, you can't do that now because you would need a Fidelity Fund certificate. So let me just explain the flow of what the law is trying to do. So let's define a property practitioner. It can be anyone basically earning commission or running a brokerage through property. So it's anyone that participates in the property sector. You're looking at bond originators, looking at attorneys, you're looking at real estate agents, which are now called property practitioners, and you're looking at homeowners associations. You're looking at the list goes on and on and on. And basically, you would need to at least have a Fidelity Fund certificate, which the new
Sorry
Board
to
of
interject
Authority,
here. Does this include body corporates of sectional title people as well and managing agents?
managing exactly, managing agent, homeowners association. You're perfectly right. But definitely, when it comes to managing agents that are running body corporates, they would need that Fidelity Fund certificate to showcase that they are professionals and they are, approved, and they are. The legislation allows them to actually conduct the sales of property, whether it's leasing or selling properties. So, so mm,
Winston, before you go further, what about short-term rentals then? Maybe 2 weeks, 3 week rentals, holiday accommodation rentals. I mean, you get agents that hire out people's homes for
yes.
like a holiday. Are they then allowed to? I mean, are they also required to have this certification as well?
Not at all. So if you're a homeowner, if you own a property directly and you would want to lease it out directly to a potential consumer, you have that private agreement with them, and the risk is most likely based on yourself and that person that you bring into your property. However, if it's someone, if it's a facilitator, an
A third
intermediary,
party.
or a third party, basically, then you're supposed to have that Fidelity Fund certificate, or else you're conducting your business illegally.
Okay.
Mm.
So let's
Okay.
go now. What is this Fidelity Fund certificate, and how does somebody? I mean, you want to do it, especially with unemployment very low, and people are looking to get into this field to be a property practitioner. How do I get one? Where do I obtain? Is there an exam do I have to write to show that I'm a competent in order to be a property
Mm.
practitioner?
Yeah. So it's fairly simple. So to answer your question, so a Fidelity Fund certificate is basically a certification that allows you to sell properties, to market properties, to lease out properties, any service whatsoever as a third party that allows you to conduct the a sale of a property in that property section, in that property sector. So if you want to get a Fidelity Fund certificate, you would have to work under a brokerage. And this can be, I don't know, Libertalia Group or Pam Golding or Remax, any registered real estate agency. Because what happens is, when you work, you start off as an intern and you're given that Fidelity Fund certificate to conduct your business or to conduct work. And as you go along, you need to submit a logbook within 12 months. So after 12 months of submitting your logbook, you then go for your NQ4, which has a higher qualification. But essentially, just talking about the Fidelity Fund certificate is such a simple process in terms of getting it, because you would need to be an intern. And then there are ways of also getting the Fidelity Fund certificate with programs that the Board of Authority is now offering, where you go directly, especially with the previously disadvantaged individuals would go and apply for that as a benefit for them to get into the programs that would allow them to get those Fidelity Fund certificates and allow them to start working in the industry.
Okay, so if I'm looking to purchase a property or sell a property or even rent a property, and I see an agent, one of the questions I should ask them is, are you certified to practice as a property practitioner? If some
Exactly.
can I ask them that? Is it valid, or I
Yeah,
should ask them that?
you should
Because
ask them that.
I want to empower my listeners here. So that's
Yes,
something. I mean, somebody who I don't have a relationship, and if,
yes,
even if it's somebody that I did have a relationship, I should say, listen here, I
yeah,
read that things are changing and there's an act now. Does your practice or you yourself, do you have the certificate?
yeah,
Are you licensed to trade
exactly.
or to work
Yeah,
as a property practitioner? So is
yeah.
this a question we should be asking individuals without Winston feeling offended that I asked you this?
Yeah. Oh, always. In fact, this law now, under the PPA, it wants, so on request, you are supposed to produce your Fidelity Fund certificate in person, or I guess digitally if you do have it on your device. But that's the first requirement if you're approaching a seller and you're trying to get a mandate to sell that property. So it's very, very important that you ask that question. And I think also it's very important for the listeners to also know this, which might make them feel a lot safer. If anyone conducts a sale or trades, tries to sell your property or lease out your property up until a point where the transaction is done, and only to find out that this person has been working, and yes, they've done all the work, they've given you tenants, or they've sold the property for you, and only to find out that they haven't had a Fidelity Fund certificate with them, they're not entitled to commission. So you can actually walk away 100% with that money, that is, even though they've done the job. So um, knowing that, just it's also important to know that even estate agents or property practitioners that are participating want to protect themselves too, so they make sure that they do have those qualifications, those certifications, so that they don't come across problems as such.
Okay. Now I think of concern, and I think of interest rather, for most of the listeners is that hidden defects. And I think now this act makes it now law in terms of disclosure when
Yeah.
it comes to hidden defects. And so let's just explore this new hidden defects clause into this act, and what does it entail and how does it differ from the previous hidden defects clause.
Okay, so previously you would just so an estate agent would just present your property. They would add on the special conditions or on the features and fittings as to what the property has. You would see the property as it is, especially in the OTP. There's a clause that's called a foot steward. So you buy what you get. And most of the estate agents and sellers and buyers would just rely on that and not take any issues further. So issues such as realizing later on after the sale that this property had latent defects, or realizing that there were patent defects during the viewing of the property. They bought the property, they were promised that those defects would be resolved, but you sometimes you come across transactions where no problems were remedied, and you're sitting with those problems now, and legally you wouldn't really have anything to back you up. So now it's very important that now this law has introduced the specific law for defects. So there's patent and latent defects, right? Patent defects is basically what you see at that point, and then latent defect is basically what comes across as a problem after the sale of the property. Well, I guess later on. So it's so important then to have a disclosure form, which is what is now required by under this act, is to have a disclosure form that the seller needs to sign to stipulate exactly what issues the property has, and whichever problems that or potential problems that might come across. And the seller, the obviously the seller needs to disclose that, and it's very then safe for the buyer to, and as well as the facilitator at that point, to continue the transaction, so that after the sale and the registration is complete, and to find out that the seller hasn't disclosed anything, and you do come across those problems, you're always able to go back to that disclosure form and either get a refund or get that certain issue remedied. So very, very important and crucial that you sign that disclosure form. Even for leasing a property, if you're a property manager, or you're renting out your property and you've hired an estate agent, make sure that you sign an inspection form. It's very similar. The disclosure form is very similar to an inspection form. The moment a tenant comes, before they occupy that property, you need to disclose every little thing that the property has. So you would do an entire inspection on the property, so that the moment they move out on expiry of the lease, you're able to state what the tenants needs to fix, if there were any problems that had occurred during the lease, and so forth. So this does protect the consumers a lot in terms of getting into disputes with sellers, and getting into disputes with estate agents. So it does really mitigate the risk of getting into an agreement with other parties.
Yeah, so good news indeed for consumers. Indeed, and I think it's important that we empower ourselves knowing our rights, because that's what I say. Being empowered is our weapon to move forward and also to then protect ourselves. It's actually our protection. Now,
That's
tell me, why was the need to change over from the estate agency board to the new what is it called,
board of authority.
board of authority? I need to start
Yes.
wrapping my, and it's no longer an estate agent, but you are now so Winston is no longer an estate agent but a
Yeah.
property practitioner, and you are part now of the, oh, you fall under the auspices of the board of authority, am I correct
Yes.
in my,
Yes,
and
correct.
okay, so
Mm.
why was the change to board of authority? And tell me, the those that were sort of on the board of authority, have
Mm.
they been replaced by new governors, or I don't know what you call them,
Yes.
facilitators or board
The
or whatever
members.
they
Yeah.
type of members there? So tell me, why was there a need for change, and what are the implications there of the for having this board of authority?
So, unfortunately, since we experienced the pandemic, going back to 2020, late 2019, 2020, we've had a lot of backlogs in terms of property registrations, transferring our property from one owner to another. And essentially, you can't, this is such an important regulation, legislation rather. You can't buy a property from someone directly and say, "I've given you money, now you give me the title deed. The property belongs to me." Every property transactions goes through the deeds
These
office.
officers. Mhm.
Yes, so it was very, very important for the problems that came about to be resolved, because we started experiencing backlogs of properties not being registered on time, a backlog of systems not working properly. So a lot of mismanagement that was happening in the industry. So we've had all these external parties, I'd call them, I don't want to call them, um, I'm looking for the word, it's slipping my mind, but it's basically external parties that came about and started protesting, I'd say. Okay, so protesters. So we've had a lot of external parties coming into play now, demanding change, demanding laws in the industry, demanding change in management, demanding change, and so we've had all of those, representatives outside, trying to bring about that change. And it got to the conclusion of realizing that as much as that was happening, with the backlogs of properties registering, a bit of corruption there and there, and all of that, this industry was starting to affect all these other property professionals, which were not necessarily covered under this, because the EAB covers any, especially estate agencies who are intermediaries. They just market, and that was the main focus. And now this law that has come about, the Property Practitioner Act, covers property developers. It covers any property professional that you can think of. And I think that change has come about based on the problems that we have been experiencing since the pandemic, and I think it was very, very important as well, because we do now see a difference. Even with the Fidelity Fund certificates, a lot of registered estate agents who've had experience, over 10 years experience in the industry, were struggling to get their Fidelity Fund certificates renewed, because you would have to renew your Fidelity Fund certificate every year. So a lot of that has now changed with the new law, with the with the new members coming into power, because now there's a system in place which I kind of like, where you need to get your logbook done, and you don't have to renew your Fidelity Fund certificate every year. You can renew it every after 3 years. Um, so there are a lot of amendments and changes that have come into place now, and I think that's exactly what has, when it came to the voting powers, that's what has now formulated.
Okay. What we're gonna do is I'd like to chat to you once everything has been now come 20 February 2022. The law is it's gonna become law now, and let's see
Yeah.
in 3 months' time how things are progressing. I mean, lots of things in theory is fantastic, but when it happens in action, you might find issues happening, or there might be backlogs with some sort. So then you can just connect with us to tell us how things are where once it's being implemented. Thank you for joining us here in your time here on Salam Media, and good luck. for the future. This is property practitioner Winston Kunene joining us here on Salam Media. Thanks so much for your
Got
time.
it. I appreciate you. Thank you, Mariam.
Okay, pleasure. We're going to go for a short break. And when we get back, yes, we're going to be doing educational insights. And once again, I'll be joined by my producer, Salilo, and we're going to be speaking about healthy lunch options. All this after the break.